Welcome on in, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules podcast. This is episode 54 of the 2024 season. This is going to be our AFLW Week 1 preview episode. We'll also have a quick look at the men's finals that starts next weekend. As always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. There's so much content happening right now. A little snippet of what we plan with the podcast for the next 5-6 weeks at least. There'll be 2 episodes going live each week as per normal. One will be focused on the men's game, one will be focused on the women's game. That's the plan. So for the next couple weeks, the late week episode, the Friday episode, will be the AFLW. And the early week episode will be the AFL men's episode. And then once the women's roster changes to them having some teams playing 2 games in a week, the early one will be the women's, and then the later episode will be the men's. But I'll keep you all updated with that as we go. Don't forget to check out the socials at All Aussie Rules pretty much everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, you name it, we got it. Also YouTube, Spotify for the podcast, and on the YouTube plenty of extra videos, bonus videos if you like. I've worked out across a 37-day period starting 3 days ago, we're going to have 31 videos, so pretty much most days there's going to be a new video on the YouTube channel, so go check all of them out. Don't forget to watch them all, like them, and hit that subscribe button. Without any further ado, we'll jump into the men's final series. Just quickly have a look at that. We lead off on Thursday next week, so a week from when I'm recording this, I guess. Just under a week from when it gets posted. Port Adelaide Geelong at Adelaide Oval. Thursday night footy. Port Adelaide favourites. Obviously qualifying final, so the loser does get a second chance. Should be a good game, you'd imagine. If the best of Port Adelaide shows up, you'd think they win, but Geelong, you can't write them off. Port will be going slight favourites into that one. Friday night footy is a Bulldogs Hawthorn at the MCG. Bulldogs currently favourites. This is an elimination final, so the loser goes home. They're 2 of the most informed teams of the competition, so one of them will be departing. And you've got to think Hawthorn are probably pretty happy that they get a week 1 final at the MCG, seeing they are away, but technically really get the home ground advantage over the Dogs in this one. Interestingly, I believe there was an announcement yesterday when you're watching this, that the AFLW Bulldogs game will be straight before this, also at the MCG, a few hours before, obviously. That is a Bulldogs Port Adelaide game, so a little double header action at the MCG. And then we jump into our Saturday finals. First up, Sydney GWS first versus 4th SCG, Saturday 3:20 PM. Should be a cracker. Sydney won both these matchups this year. They'll be starting favourites. They finished top of the ladder. It's hard to go against them, but GWS's form is quite good of late. They haven't lost for a little while outside of the last week when they kind of rested some players, and I don't know how committed they were to winning that game. I'm not sure. And then the final game of the week 1 of finals for the men's game is Brisbane Carlton up at the Gabba. Brisbane will be starting short favourites in this one. You'd think they should win it based on form. They're going pretty well. Carlton are not. Rematch of last year's prelim final, in which Carlton started really well and then Brisbane just got over the line. You go back to opening round this year, they met at this same ground. Brisbane, in a reverse, dominated the first quarter with like 6 goals up or so in that first quarter. Carlton flew back in the third quarter and ended up winning it by a point in the end. So should be a cracker. All 4 games could be huge. And 2 teams will be finishing their season on that weekend. So that's everything for the men's game. There's lots happening at the moment in off-season news for them. A lot of trade talk, a lot of delistings, a lot of that sort of stuff, some re-signings and whatnot. But we will be leaving that for the moment. We're going to focus on the games at hand, both men's and the women's. And then once the men's season wraps up, then we'll start looking at the off-season stuff, what your team needs, what your team's chasing, and all of that. Because at the moment, there's not too much point on getting bogged down with that information too much, I don't think. So we'll jump into the women's game for this weekend. Massive weekend for them, I guess. So first up, Friday night footy starts our season off up in Sydney. We got Sydney hosting the Collingwood Magpies. Sydney will be going into this comfortable favourites, not huge favourites, but reasonably comfortable favourites. They finished 8th on the ladder last year. Collingwood finished 11th, missed finals after losing both of their last 2 games. If they had have won both of them, they would have made finals for sure. If they had have won one, they would have needed a bit of a percentage boost. But nonetheless, they missed the finals. Sydney played finals just in what was a pretty solid season from Sydney, seeing the year before I don't think they won a game, or they only won one maybe. So yeah, 2022 was a really bad season for the Swans. They bounced back last year and really did well. So I kind of expect them to go pretty well again this year. I'm not convinced on the Collingwood team. For those that don't know, I am a Collingwood supporter and I am an AFLW Collingwood member as well. I'm not hugely confident on their season, but part of me hopes that they do really well. And maybe they can kick that off with a win in Sydney, although I find it doubtful. There's 2 games on Friday night though. Over in the West, we got West Coast Eagles Richmond. It's a late start over in the Eastern States. It'll be 9:15 Eastern State times. Obviously 7:15 start over in the West. Games are shorter in the women's games, so 2 hours will knock it on the head. As you can see, or you probably can't really see because it's pretty zoomed out, a little bit blurry, but Richmond will be starting favourites in this one. West Coast last year had a bit of a rough season. They're going pretty similar to their men's team, to be honest. Last year they went 2-8, which is not fantastic, and the year before they also went 2-8. So they've only won 4 games in the last 2 seasons. Not hugely positive for them. Meanwhile, the Richmond Tigers, they finished 10th last year. Had a really good percentage, finished 5 and 5, solid percentage. They finished the season with a really good win over Collingwood, but fell a game short of playing finals. I think everybody expects Richmond to go over and win this one. I'd be surprised to see West Coast show enough improvement to be competitive in this one based on what they've shown the last 2 years. But strange things happen in football, so I'm not completely writing off the West Coast Eagles just yet. I would like to see how they go first up before we make any rash decisions. Saturday, we got a blockbuster lineup of football. 5 games, 4 of them, none of them overlap until that last game of Port Adelaide clashing with Geelong Melbourne. So you can sit in front of your telly and watch a lot of footy on KO Sports and Foxtel this weekend. First up, we got GWS versus the Bulldogs. This is in Canberra at Manuka Oval. GWS coming off a tough campaign last year. They certainly were not very competitive in too many of their games last year. They started, I think, 0-5, ended up winning 2 games in the run home, but still ended up quite a long way down the ladder. Same can be said for the Doggies, who went 1-9 last year. And I don't, from what I understand, what I've been hearing, some big off-season moves in the negative sense for the Doggies. So it might be tough for them going forward. They're certainly not expected to do too well. Both of these teams, in fact, are in the markets the lowest two ranked teams in terms of chances of winning the premiership, equal with West Coast, who we just mentioned. So probably not the biggest blockbuster game of the weekend. However, in a short season, the winner of this sets themselves up quite well, just due to the fact that you're only playing 11 games. You probably need 6 to make finals, maybe 7, but probably 6 will be enough to get you through. Maybe, we'll see. Depends how close it is, I guess, the competition this year. But if you can get one straight up, it's a really good start. The next game is the Bombers versus Fremantle. It's at Windy Hill. Bombers were pretty solid last year. They finished 7th on the ladder. They went 6-4. Fell apart a little bit towards the end. Could have been a top 4 chance with a few weeks to go, but just didn't quite close out the season. Meanwhile, Fremantle, they missed finals. They only won 4 games. Had a really low percentage for a team that went 4-6. Bombers should be favourites here. I won't say they will win this, but they should win this on paper. They're about 6th ranked team in markets this year, whereas Fremantle are down towards the lower 6 or so. That's about all I have to say about this matchup. It should go the way of the Bombers, I would imagine. Next up is Gold Coast St Kilda up at PFS, same ground that the men's team plays at. I wonder if they'll have as good a home record as the men's team. They certainly would hope so, because that will put them in good stead this year. Gold Coast coming off last year, they did play finals. They finished 5th on the ladder and were only half a game outside the top 4. Finished the season really well going into finals. 6 wins, 3 losses and a draw is a really good result. Sorry, I'm just getting up some things. They did, however, lose week 1 of the finals against Sydney in an elimination final in which they were the home team. So that was probably a disappointing result and end to their season after showing a bit of promise and almost making top 4. St Kilda, they finished 9th on the ladder, missing out on finals by percentage, roughly 4%, so that's probably like 20-30 points in the Women's League. A pretty good season overall, but in the end, not quite making finals, but only 8 teams make it. There's 18 in the league, so not too bad from them. Interestingly, Gold Coast sit about 6 in the market, and and St Kilda a few spots behind that in about 10th or 11th. Should be a good game, actually, really. Both teams wanting to get their seasons off to a good start. Gold Coast obviously were the better team last year slightly. We'll see how that plays out on a Saturday night, but I'm going with the Suns. Next up, we have Geelong-Melbourne. This is one of the big 2 games of the weekend, I think. So this is 4th versus 5th in the current markets. 2 of only 5 teams at $10 or less in the markets. Both have a good chance to get their seasons off to a good start. Obviously, Melbourne finished 2nd on the ladder last year, going 8 wins, 2 losses with a huge percentage of 222.9%, massive. And Geelong, they've also played finals. They finished 6th on the ladder with a massive percentage as well. They went 6-4 with a percentage of 141.2. I think both teams are expected to go pretty well this year. I think down at the Cattery, I like the Cats. We'll get on to all my tips at the end, but should be one of the most important games of the round. Looking forward to it, see how it goes. Geelong obviously in finals. They beat Essendon in the first week. They then came up against Melbourne, who they're playing here, and lost. Oh, Geelong won it by 5 points, in the semi-final. They then went to the prelim final and lost to the Lions by 4 points, who went on to win the premiership. Meanwhile, Melbourne, they obviously got the second chance, went into finals with obviously a very good record, 8 wins, 2 losses, as we said. They got pumped by North Melbourne in the first qualifying final, lost by 41 points, 9-50. So they got smacked that week, and then the following week they were a lot more competitive against Geelong, but lost by 5 points. I think things point towards a Geelong win in this one, but this should be one of the games of the round. Maybe this one or the final game are the two best games of the round. We'll get to the other one, obviously, shortly. The final game of the Saturday afternoon or evening, this is nighttime now, nighttime football, Port Adelaide showdown, opening round. One team coming off a really good year, the other team not so much. Adelaide last year, they went 9-1, losing just one game in the regular season, whereas Port Adelaide, they only won 2 games, 7 losses and a draw. So, completely different campaigns. A lot more hope given towards Adelaide this year. Pretty high in the markets. They're currently 3rd ranked team. By the end of this round, they could be the top ranked team. You'd expect that they will go into this and beat Port Adelaide, I would say, quite comfortably. So their season finished last year. They lost their qualifying final against the Lions by 2 points. They backed it up the next week in the semi-final over in Adelaide and absolutely smacked the Sydney Swans, 82-15 in one of the biggest smackings you'll see in AFLW. And then in the prelim final, they lost by a point to the Kangaroos in what was a heartbreaking loss for them after a really good season. So they'll be looking to go one step further this year, or probably 2 steps further, and win a premiership, because they were certainly a competitive team last year and just missed out in the end. Most of the final series last year was really close. Like, both prelims were less than a goal margin. The grand final ended up being 17 points, but with probably 8 minutes to go, there was only 1 point in it. Semi-finals were both, one was close, one was within a kick, the other one was a flogging. And week 1 of the finals, there was one close game, one flogging, and a couple close-ish games, I guess. But that leads us to the end of Saturday night football. 2 games left to look at for the AFLW. There'll be a lot more in-depth analysis and stuff going forward of the AFLW for future weeks. But as we're learning about the season, we're just going to run through the games for this first episode. Where am I up to? We got Hawthorn Carlton in a bit of a Victorian grudge match, on Sunday afternoon at Frankston. Hawthorn home game here. Last year, Hawthorn finished 14th, 3 wins, 7 losses. Finished the season reasonably well, so certainly moved into the season quite well after a little bit of a slow start. Carlton, they finished 12th on the ladder, 4-6, and lost their last 4 games. So after 6 weeks, they were 4-2, and looking like a chance to make a run for the year. They just did not finish the year off well at all. Looking at hopes of both teams, Hawthorn, I won't say they have huge hopes, but definitely top 8 prospects, I think, in this season. Carlton, slightly less chance, but I still wouldn't write them off in the season at all. Both potentially top 8 teams, but also both could finish in that bottom 4 or 5 teams, depending on, I guess, how their season starts. And this is a pretty important game for both teams. Hawthorn are going to be probably starting favourites in this one. The final game of the round 1 of the 2024 AFLW season, Brisbane North Melbourne. They're called Kangaroos, I guess, technically in AFLW, because aren't they called North Melbourne Tasmania Kangaroos or whatever they're called? But big game up at Ipswich Sunday afternoon, 3:05 kickoff. This is probably game of the round. Grand final rematch from last year. The Lions took the premiership by 17 points in the end over the Kangaroos, in what was a game that I won't say was controlled by North Melbourne, but they led for certainly a large portion of the match. But that last quarter was really good by Brisbane. Their tall forwards took over the game and kicked them away a bit. So in the regular season, both teams finished 7-3. Kangaroos were third, Brisbane were fourth. Kangaroos' percentage of 224.4% was insanely huge. Brisbane's was still pretty solid at 149. Interestingly enough, Brisbane actually were the better offensive team out of the two, but the defence of the Kangaroos was insane. They only conceded 213 points in their 10 games of the regular season, so we're only conceding 21 points per match. Meanwhile, they were scoring 48 basically points per match. So, they just controlled every match, really. Made finals, fell at the last hurdle. Both teams had their chances in that one, and in the end, Brisbane got over the line. Certainly not convincing, but their last quarter was very, very good. That's what I think is game of the round. Both these two teams are the two favourites to win the premiership this year. Brisbane slightly ahead of North Melbourne. It's an important match for both teams because, as we kind of mentioned, it's only an 11-game season. If you get off to a bad start, you lose your first one. It's certainly not impossible, let's be honest, but certainly puts you on the back foot, and all of a sudden, if you do lose this first one, it puts a lot of pressure on your second week, because unlike the men's game where Brisbane lose their first 3 and they've still got 20 games to make it up, in this one, you lose your first 3, you pretty much can't put another foot wrong for the rest of the year if you want to make finals. And neither of these two teams have the easiest week 2. Brisbane have Melbourne in Melbourne next week, and North Melbourne play Geelong next week. So, not easy games by any stretch of the imagination, or based on what we expect to happen this season. It's going to be the first couple of weeks is certainly going to be learning about a lot of the changes, because you see a lot more debutants in AFLW each year. There's a lot for every team happening this weekend. It's going to be very important, I guess, to watch these first couple games, first couple rounds, and really find out where teams are. And as the season goes, we'll probably get a better understanding of that. That's my analysis for week 1. That's all the matches. We'll be doing this every week. The next AFLW episode will be next Thursday or Friday morning, going live on YouTube and Spotify. We'll be doing all 9 matches for round 2. We'll also be doing a review of all 9 matches from round 1. So stick around; it should be good. I'm looking forward to the season. It should be a lot of fun. Certainly feel the whole of the men's season coming to a wrap over the following week or so. Without any further ado, let's jump into my tips for AFLW Week 1. Here they are. As we said, Game 1, Sydney, I'm going to beat Collingwood. My heart says Collingwood, but my tip says Sydney. Richmond to beat West Coast in a close one. I think West Coast hopefully can show some improvement on last year, but Richmond do have some very good players, so I wouldn't be surprised if they won by a lot more than that. GWS to beat the Bulldogs by 15. We've got to see Bulldogs. They're a completely different team than last year, and I'm not convinced it's going to be in a good way, but we'll wait and see how that plays out on the weekend. Essendon to beat Fremantle by 20. Gold Coast in a close one against St Kilda. Geelong at their home ground against Melbourne in what should be, I've said 20 points. It's an important game for both teams. Either team could win that one. Adelaide should be way too good for Port Adelaide, I think, in most facets of this game. Hawthorn to beat Carlton by 15. And then rounding out the weekend in the grand final rematch, I've gone Brisbane by 3 points. Brisbane, I kind of have a sort of soft spot for, because they were my second team, I guess, last year. Once Collingwood were knocked out, I was going for Brisbane in the finals, and they did get over the line. So, even though I won't be supporting them in the men's competition this final series, well, not at first at least, I will be supporting them kind of in the women's. Collingwood will always be my number one team, though. Yeah, that's everything for this episode of All Aussie Rules podcast. This is episode 54. Don't forget to tune back in. Monday's episode will be our AFL Men's Week 1 Finals preview episode, so go check that out. It should be a cracker. There's so much good football coming up, both in the men's and women's games. Also, if you haven't already, go to my YouTube, check out the videos we're posting. We're posting end-of-season reviews every day. At time of recording, all Australian team has not been announced just yet, but it will be in the next hour or so. But I have posted a video yesterday of my All-Australian first and second team, so go check that out. Leave a comment on any mistakes that you think I made. Appreciate you for tuning in. This has been All Aussie Rules. This is podcast episode 54. We'll be back on Monday. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you next time.